Hello and welcome back. Thank you for continuing to hang out with us. I hope you enjoyed Inherited. I'm bringing back Deandra and Dwayne, and we are about to talk to the filmmakers Humphrey Brown and Mr. Sekou Brown, who are the director and writer of Inherited. How are you?
All right. How you guys
Okay,
doing?
Doing
we're
well, doing well. Glad to be here.
once again, we are joined by Deandra Crippen and Dwayne Snape. They are therapist counselors here in San Antonio as well, with Chosen for Hope. Is that correct,
Awesome.
Dwayne? Chosen, yes, yeah,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Chosen for Hope um, Therapy Ministry here in San Antonio. So, just to get started, gentlemen, could you tell us a little bit about your background and how y'all met up?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
No,
You kick us
Humphrey
off. You kick us
Brown.
off.
So actually a part of the church. Church here in Houston.
Sure.
At the time, though, it was in Alvin, Texas. I don't know anything about Houston and Alvin, but they're Houston's Alvin's about 45 minutes west of Houston. But anyway, so the church there, Sekou, was out in Georgia taking online classes that were provided by the church, and as it goes, and the TA of that particular class was a sister that I've known for a while. They were having some talks, and say Houston joined them, and actually I just knew him as a that was for the church. But then about 5 years ago now, we got to on a short project that he actually with a film that he wrote. A couple other the church were producing it, and I director. And during and I really started to connect, and we realized that hey, we work really well together. And so we did a couple other projects after. We've just been rocking and rolling ever since.
Okay, thank you. It's an awesome movie. Now, how did the idea for Inherited come about?
I'll hop in, I guess, on this one. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, got you. So, man, the idea really was just kind of birthed out of the desire to do a project. I mean, if I can just kind of bring you guys back into 2020, because that almost feels like trauma in and of itself. Good thing we're in good company. But in 2020, the pandemic breaks. As Humphrey mentioned, him and I had worked on several film projects, and we had some things in the can that we wanted to get out that we kept stalling because we were trying to, like everyone else in the world, trying to wait this COVID thing out, right? Like, maybe a couple more months and we could do the project, maybe a couple more months. And that just turned into, next thing you know, we're in July of 2020 and we've not done anything. And at that point, I had noticed, several other filmmakers, one TV show, All Rise, had did an all virtual episode. A filmmaker, her name is Tamika Briscoe. She had did a show called the QT series, which was about a couple that fell in love during COVID, right? All shot virtually, right? And the final straw, as Humphrey mentioned, we both go to the same church, and at the time we were doing our conference virtually, and he sent me a video over to edit, and as I edited that video, I was like, man, that's it, final straw. Where I'm gonna go ahead. Let's try to create a film, and I want to create a film that not only can tell a solid and compelling story, but it can also live in the virtual space. That way, we can keep the cast and the crew safe. And went into the closet and wrote out of a extremely familiar and intimate experience for myself, but many others as well, caring for aging parents. Um, you know, about 5 years ago, my grandmother passed, away. And that was like a 10-year bout of our family collectively figuring out what to do with grandma. You know what I mean? And really in the midst of COVID, my dad was beginning to have pre-dementia symptoms, right around the time I was kind of writing Inherited. And so I wrote it out of a real, very familiar place of really understanding the world of having to care for a loved one, right? And just kind of wrote it out of that. And Humphrey was crazy enough to kind of go with the idea. You know what I mean? Like, just we're like, look, we could do this whole thing. I mean, literally 90% of it done virtually, right? From casting to Humphrey doing rehearsals with the actors to shoot day where 90% of it was all virtual, right? So we hustled and we made it happen. And little did we know it would have the type of we just really wanted to do something. I'll be totally transparent. We wanted to tell a good story, but we really just didn't want to be sitting on our arses, you know what I mean, waiting this COVID thing out. But like God always does, man, he meets us right where we are. And like I said, it's just amazing the impact the film is having.
So,
And hopefully, Sekou said that you did you did the rehearsals online. How did that go? How did that process go?
Yeah, so we had to cast it. Again, this was in the COVID, so we anything about this. Can you get it through the phone? Can you get it through mail? We didn't know things. So, so we were just, what's the safest way we could do this? And like Sekou said, he had saw an episode of Rise of Virtual. And like, well, we're going to do it virtual. We got to do everything virtual. And one place now to do what they call self reels or self takes, where they audition themselves, film themselves, and they send the audition tape to a producer or a director or whatnot to be cast. And so this was kind of in the beginning stages of that. So there's were accustomed to, and so this process was no different. Just live, it was a live audition. So we sent out that we leaned on to, like, hey, do you know somebody that can play this? This is not. Again, a lot of actors, like all work stopped. Like nobody was doing anything. We were fortunate in that regard. We had we were able to find some pretty talented people. But because COVID was taking off, we would set up a little Zoom call, and Google Meet, we have you, and we'd send them the song, which is the pages that actors would read, and we do it, and just like for the most part, myself, Sekou, maybe another person there, and we like, okay, your Wi-Fi is good, and you can, and we had people from Seattle, we had people, all throughout Texas, we had people coming from different parts, audition just because they were, and that was because we were setting the stage, because that was going to be the way they did be able to. They had to be able to act against a screen, against another body, and so that was super important. And if they could do anything, we figured, hey, you could do it when we actually start rolling.
Okay. Dwayne, you had a question?
I have a lot. I love the film, gentlemen. Great work, my brothers. What was your inspiration for this? There's a lot of dynamics that play out on the screen, if you will, and there are a lot of elements in there that speak to some of the struggles that we have in our community, our families, in particular African American families. One thing that stands out in my mind, I don't know who it was, but somebody said, "Don't speak that." Like that's somebody that's been to church, right? And you don't speak that as if you not saying a particular thing is gonna may or may not manifest it in the power that we believe is people who go who have a church experience or relationship with God believe in the life and death power of the tongue. But there was so many other elements in there that just jumped out to me that I appreciated and resonated with me. Help me understand, like, what that process was, and how therapeutic it was for you, and what was your inspiration.
So a lot of that, it was a tandem, right? I think it was what I wrote, and then Humphrey kind of bringing it to life on screen. But just from a character point, like I said, I lived this very intimately. And one of the things that I wrestled with, and I'm coming to find out now that many people wrestled with, was really the demise of someone that you love and care about, right? So if you look at the protagonist character, I really kind of wrote him where the other siblings are taking this a lot more serious than him, right? And oftentimes when you look at dementia cases, like, we tend to brush off a lot of the early signs. It's happening right in front of you, but it's not until it gets real till we pay attention to it, right? So I really wanted to kind of write that dynamic into the character. And then of course the family dynamics, right? Again, my entire all of my siblings had to deal with my grandmother, right? Like, so like that was a real thing. And for many, you look at people being aged and having to go into homes, minorities, that's black and brown people. We tend, not that we don't put our people in homes, but that's like the last resort. We're likely to take that on, right? So what I really wanted to relay in here was, me and my siblings trying to figure this thing out. And I think that really kind of resonated. But to your point, Dwayne, at the end of the day, this is a story. Although relatable, these are some PKs, right? Right. These are preacher's kids for people who don't know that. And to your point, I did want to kind of bring some awareness to the idea that to in many regards, and to no fault to the church at large, but we're just kind of starting to turn the corner of really taking mental health challenges serious. Some churches, mine included, take it more serious than others, but many churches, we tend to brush it off and turn it into the devil, and we're not properly addressing and caring for people. And I wanted to introduce all of these elements in a story form. I don't know, Humphrey, if you want to add anything, but I don't know if that answers your question, Dwayne.
Yeah, no, and he's right on it. Particularly when you're talking about, we wanted to show in the film, and with all the actors, one of the things I kept stressing was it being authentic. And when you're dealing with something like mental health, caring for aging parents, it sometimes it can come off as jokey and not real serious. And I've seen characterizations of people, it being like a funny thing, and there's really nothing funny about it. It's really a very serious thing, and we really wanted to stress the to all the actors that's to really be authentic, and the struggles that siblings are having when this very real disruption happens in your life. We had one character who was very successful, and she had to change her life around, and the protagonist who was in another place, living in another city, and then having to drive back to even see what's going on with the father, and another one who was kind of just getting started in her life, and but she's there with the father. And so all these different characters with different parts of their lives, and then all of a sudden here's this very real disruption that happens, and where do you go from there? And a lot of these things, as we've been talking with other agencies and who deal with caring for aging parents and dementia, we've learned, and it's been eye-opening for me. A lot of these issues and disruptions can be mitigated a great deal if you're prepared and you have conversations about, hey mom, hey dad, well, what about this, or what happens, or who do you, what do you want, getting your medical stuff together, getting your financial stuff together, getting, okay, who's going to, my mom just told me last night, I'm moving with you and your wife. I said, huh? I said, it's like we're not having these conversations soon enough. I never thought you'd leave Houston, then leave Austin, anyway. But we're not having these conversations enough. And this film kind of highlights like what happens when, something that's very real just kind of boom, lands right in your lap.
Absolutely. And I love how you even brought up just the fact that we typically don't have these conversations. And not only just the dynamic that y'all brought up a little bit earlier about being in the church and how we're just now turning the corner for that, but also just in the Black community overall, because we avoid a lot of things. We don't want to talk about things most of the time. And so then when the metal meets the road, then we're addressing those things at that point. And it's like, okay, we should have been talking about this a long time ago. And so that even brought the thing that stood out to me, I think, the most about this film is just the title in itself, because I don't know what inspired the title for you guys, but when I saw the title Inherited, I just thought about the fact how we don't only just inherit DNA, but we inherit a lot of dysfunctional patterns. We inherit a lot of debt. We inherit a lot of roles that we've taken on in our communities and just in our family dynamics, because we don't talk about things. And so it just gets passed down from generation to generation to generation. So I was like, oh, I love the title. That was the first thing that popped in my head. So what inspired that title for you guys?
Well, it's interesting that the title itself really, I guess the seeds of it was actually planted by a sermon my pastor preached many years ago about just the importance of thinking generationally, right? Black folks, whether you were born in the Americas, in the Caribbeans, or Africa, we've all been impacted by white supremacy, colonialism, the slavery system. We've all been impacted in some kind of way, and many of us are from a financial standpoint, are starting with a crutch. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, many of us are first, or if you're lucky, second generation college educated and all of that, whatever. Just, I don't want to kind of go into the financial realms too deep here, but the point I did want to drive home from that sermon was it impacted me to begin to think like, man, what can I, how can I leave something financially, not only for my kid, but my kid's kid, right? Like, and that really, that when I left out of that sermon, that stuck with me. And when I sat down to write this, I wanted that thread, of not only, leaving something tangible, right? But, a lot of what the father was trying to do was trying to even kind of keep the marriage together, right? Because, it's kind of subtle in the film there, but he had, as you brought up, DeAndre, like he kind of had brought up, he had inherited, some marital issues even from his dad. So I want to kind of put all these threads of not only, the financial inheritance, but then, we inherit some of the sins of our fathers kind of come back to and haunt us in the present as well. But yeah, but like I said, the larger point though was just the idea, I do want people to walk away with the idea of, man, I do have to think generationally, right? You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. And then just even because you're right, you're absolutely right. A lot of the times, even when it comes to the financial aspect of things and passing down that generational wealth, a lot of times we aren't equipped with the tools to do so because it's never taught and we don't talk about it. And so we just pass down the brokenness of, okay, well, let's just try to figure this out. And so I liked how you guys even added in just the scripture at the end about how, leaving an inheritance to your children's children. And so that was huge. Really good film. I saw a lot of dynamics, even just within my own family, looking at this film.
And just as it pertains specifically though to the caring for aging parents, as Humphrey mentioned, we've been kind of screening this film with different agencies, being on different podcasts, and we were on an aging parent, a probate lawyer's podcast, and she talked about how us not having this conversation on what to do with our parents as they age. She brought up death is one thing. When they die, we got to have the insurance and stuff in place. You know what I mean? And we all know the harms of that. Probably everyone on this conversation has gotten a text, help me on the funeral type text from some family member or friend. We already know the harm that'll cause upon death. But what she brought up that really stood out to me, it kind of blew my wig. She says so much wealth gets lost for people not managing. What happens if you didn't plan for the extended care of a loved one, right? That now, if they did have some wealth, gets eaten up because you guys didn't plan properly, right? She says that happens very often. And Black folks, we know we don't have wealth to get eaten up. We don't have room for wealth to be eaten up. But she says so much of it gets taken because extended care is very costly. It is extremely costly, but there's a lot of things the government has in place to aid people through that process that white folks take advantage of, but Black people have no clue of, right? So I do want to kind of bring that up from an inheritance standpoint as well.
And even with the aging parents part, one of the mental health pieces that I even saw in there was when they started talking about the dad's mental health in that moment. And it was almost like, no, we're not talking about that. Like, no, he's okay. That's just dad. And almost like dismissing what's really going on, almost as if it was too difficult to even fathom seeing him from a different perspective than what they were used to seeing him from. And so that was a huge piece for me. And then just how the dynamic that gets passed down, how we tend to have these roles within our families. We have the responsible one. We have the one who bears the burden of all the things and who has to make all the decisions. So a lot of dynamics. Can you guys speak to that piece as well?
Yeah, one of the things that was pretty that we wanted to touch on was, of course, the film being shot the way it was shot during the pandemic, and having that, just doing it in that FaceTime medium was one thing, but then also within the characters themselves, when our protagonist is presented with the video of his father, kind of having an episode, there is that denial kind of piece that goes on. He's like, well, y'all keep trying to put him like he's crazy, but this is just dad. And during the pandemic, a lot of people were dealing with a lot of mental stuff, and it did get kind of brushed off. Like, I know, we've had, and I'm sure some of y'all have even known people that, kind of had that sense of denial with, well, you're just lonely, or, well, it's just, you just, you'll be all right. You've just been inside for a while. But people were really going through during the pandemic, and one thing the pandemic did was help expose a lot of the mental health stuff, because people were like, oh, I can't just go to the club and forget about my problems, or I can't just go to the bar and drink away my pain, or I can't just go and spend all these hours doing something to disconnect. I'm inside. And so with the film, it's like, okay, we're in the middle of the pandemic. What's a real kind of what's really going on, and what's something that's just this is just how so and so is, or so and so acts. We see a real, in the film, we see a real breakdown of a family figure that's going through it in a very real way. And when we drop in on the film, now everyone has to deal with that. And I think we saw a lot of that during the pandemic. And it was even more stressful during the pandemic because, and again, we keep talking about the pandemic like it's over, but it's even more stressful because you couldn't just get up and go visit your loved one, especially if they're in another state or somewhere you had to fly. The planes were shut down. You couldn't just get up and fly and visit. And so that was really tough on a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, just speaking to that point, my father got sick right before the pandemic and ended up passing right before the world shut down. And but I remember I went to visit my grandkids, and when I came back, he was in the hospital, and I
Mhm.
wanted to go visit him, and they told me I couldn't because I just got off the plane. And because he was ex-military, so he was at a military hospital. And I remember sitting in the parking lot and crying. And I called my best friend because it was a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that there was nothing I could do. Because all I could think is if I can get up there and ask those doctors these questions, we can fix this, we can figure out what's going on. But I wasn't able to do it. And I think the pandemic kind of forced a lot of people in their roles and the relationships to kind of say, okay, this is not working. And so now how do I handle that? So now we have to look at different ways. We have to really examine ourselves and see what's going on and deal with some of the challenges that we have because everybody has challenges, especially in the relationships and who they think they are. Because I think we have these roles, but sometimes these roles are based on who we think we are. I'm this person, so this is how I handle it, and this is what I'm going to do, and things are going to be great. And then the pandemic came around and said, no, I don't think so. Because now you have this situation and you're not able to handle it the way you want to handle it. You're not able to go in the way you're used to. And so now looking at different coping skills and having it depend on other family members. And I think throughout life, we become very comfortable in those roles that we kind of adopt for ourselves and the roles our family members give us. Um, like I was literally staying home. I moved in with my parents to save money to buy a house. And now I have somehow become that family member that kind of gives advice and helps out and kind of mediates situations. And that's all I never thought I would be in. But I'm okay in it. Apparently, I do very well in it, according to my family members. But just kind of seeing that, I think it gave us a chance to really look at who we are. And I think that happens with a lot of people. Um, I do have a question for both of the Browns. How were you impacted by COVID or by the pandemic and the shutdown or whatever you want to call it? Did you have any real challenges that you had to address or deal with?
Man, I get from a mental health standpoint, man, not really. I think yeah, not there. I think I stayed pretty even keel. I mean, it was crazy. It came very close to home. Personally, my wife got COVID, and
Um,
I didn't. Fortunately, myself and my daughter didn't. So it got really close. And but I leveraged the pandemic honestly to focus in and lock down on filmmaking. And even SABIFF, I actually screened a film in 2020 in at SABIFF that I did, concerning the racial pandemic that happened with the George Floyd thing, right? But yeah, no, I mean, other than that, the pandemic, I mean, leaned into my loved ones, leaned into my church community, kept my mental where it needed to be, and I stayed focused in on making strides in filmmaking.
okay.
I,
To kind of lean in. I was able to kind of lean in, to my church community a great deal. We were fortunate to have a pastor that was kind of ahead of the curve with the whole streaming thing. He was really intentional about making sure he came on literally every day to connect, with our community of faith. And from a physical standpoint, yeah, I did. I lost, a couple of friends that I had to COVID. My mother, she really became isolated, very isolated. She was literally afraid to leave her home, and so that was something, because she lives alone in Austin. But I mean, she's was really it really affected her a great deal. I mean, it really took a while for her to begin to even come out as she got vaccinated and stuff like that. So you know, personally, I was like I said, I was very grateful. None of my family ever got COVID when we got, vaccinated pretty early, even my kids. And so not, I don't know where people are with regards to the vaccine. That's just sugar water. I don't know, but we were able to avoid getting COVID. so I feel very blessed in that regard. But to be sure, I mean, me and my wife, we at the time were going to we were doing online counseling, we, for marriage counseling, and that, kind of even helped just to have another person outside of our dynamic to bounce things off of. So we definitely, and it was virtual, online virtual counseling. So that was a really big plus for us. But yeah, we feel grateful to not have been impacted so harshly in a lot of ways that other people have been.
I think one of the I had one comment that I wanted to make as well for this film. When you guys talk about even not only just the aging parents, but then the fact that with COVID, the biggest theme that stands out to me is the grief piece. And it brought so much grief, just, not only grief for the change in our day-to-day routines, but then just when we did lose people to COVID, then not being able to have those closure ceremonies, as well as just being able to, like you said, someone mentioned a little bit earlier, just being able to go to your loved one's house, just to hug them, just to kind of have that connection with them and all of that. And so on top of having to deal with the grief piece, then a lot of the anger that comes up as well. How would you say that piece played a role for you guys as it relates to this film?
Oh yeah, the distance portion, we definitely, out of necessity on how the film living in the virtual space, we wanted to kind of, we were almost forced to kind of create that distance. But in terms of just anger and dealing with it, I'm trying to kind of think through what, some side effects of that. Right now, full disclosure, we're kind of in pre-production and kind of expanding this story, what happened after this moment, because you're right, many of us, had to deal, this is a unknown fact about COVID. I think we're at about maybe 850,000 deaths, I think last I looked, for COVID deaths, and about 50,000 people died right in their homes, which sounds crazy, but it makes a lot of sense, right? There's still no real cure for this thing. So even if you went to the hospital and got diagnosed with it, they sent you home, to quarantine. And that was a death sentence for a lot of people, right? So this story, and that it wasn't by design. It was just how the story got played out. But it was a death of someone dying at home, right? From COVID. So so to answer your question, I'm just kind of thinking through. The son would be dealing with grief. The sisters would be dealing with grief of not, potential, because it's a lot of people that, I've heard stories of families fighting over keeping the distance, right? Like they're like, no, I want to go see them, and it's worth it to me to see my loved one, even if I could potentially harm them or they could harm me. I just want to see them, and that caused a lot of strife in family members. So I can only imagine, what someone would be dealing with if you kept your distance and the person died and you never got to spend those last few moments with them. Like I could see that being, very impactful on someone.
Absolutely. And even when they keep it a secret, the secretive portion of it.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we do in our communities. Sometimes as parents, we don't want our children to worry about us, no matter what age your children are and what age you are as a parent. So even as your parents get older, they may have an illness or something going on and are not always honest with us about it for whatever reason. And then finding out that they are sick and they do transition. And I think one of the emotions that comes up when that happens is anger. Because if there's anger, there's a lot of doubts, there's a lot of what ifs, and all those things can definitely take a toll on us mentally. As I stated, when my dad passed, he had cancer. He didn't know he had cancer. I was taking him to his appointments, and I still didn't know because of the way they would phrase it and the way they would say it. And so finding out after the fact, first I was devastated. I was like, if they had told me, maybe I could have done something different. And so that's when. So I think with grief and COVID, like Deonda said, I think there's so many losses and so many things that have changed, and anger is a large part of the emotions I think that we feel. A lot of times when we're angry or upset or we're feeling hopeless, and I think we can tie that a lot of times to grief, the loss of something. And I think with COVID, that's kind of what happened. Even in the film, I think it's the one sister who was kind of well off. She comes across as very angry, but at the same time, that she could have been masking any number of emotions. Maybe she felt hopeless because there was nothing she could do. Maybe because she's so accomplished in other areas of her life, but in this one situation, there's really nothing she can do. So she's gonna try and manage it the best way she knows how, and it comes across as very angry and very oppositional. When in fact, it just may be her way of trying to heal the situation when she doesn't have tools or the resources to do it at that time because of COVID. And so everything was so limited, and like I said, you have to kind of come up with creative ways and other ways to kind of deal with those situations.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think you're spot on with that. A lot of people during the COVID, during COVID, and even now are still dealing with grief, loss of loved ones, and then also, loss of opportunity. Some people lost jobs.
Yeah.
Some people, had to switch careers. Had to do any number of transitions to deal with COVID and the to deal with COVID and the life that it kind of created. It created a whole new way of that we communicate, the way we talk, the way we work. And so it was a real blessing for us to be able to one, get the film completed during COVID, but then also to bring light to some of these issues that, as you mentioned, we just don't talk about, and we just sit on, and we deal with our grief, and we just eat it, and the anger, we just eat it. And so hopefully the film will help to spark discussion, help to open up some of those communicative lines between family members, and reach out and get help, like you all being, LPCs, man. People need to know how to get in touch with you guys and how to leverage the skill sets that you have to help people deal with what they're dealing with. And so we definitely applaud you all for what you do. As an actor and a director, I get to play the part of someone dealing with, this kind of trauma or whatever, but you guys deal with it on the daily. And so definitely want you all to stay in the fight, because we need you for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Now, if someone wanted to access Inherited, how would they be able to do that?
All right. Well, they can check us out. We're actually going to be officially launching the film for Mental Health Month in May, but details about that launch and other film projects we're working on, you can find all that at either IG or Instagram or Facebook at Color Coded Films. This is our production company. So Color Coded Films, it's probably popping up on the screen somewhere. And check us out. And, like I said, more to come. We're really finding a home in this space and really want to tell more stories to help people deal with this challenging time in their life. So more to come.
Yes. And thank you for that, for wanting to do that. I think it's mental health. It's interesting that you're releasing that in May, which of course is Mental Health Awareness Month, because I think that's something that's desperately needed in our community. Because like I said, we talk about it, we brush it off, we make jokes about it, but it's a real thing, and it impacts our lives and our children's lives and our children's lives in so many ways. And we need to start having more dialogues and more conversations. And a lot of times that door is opened up through art, through what you guys do. So thank you so much for taking the courage and jumping out there and putting these things on film for everyone to see, and hopefully it will open up conversations so our community can definitely start to heal instead of passing trauma on for generation after generation after generation. Now, with that being said, we do have Mr. Wayne Snaith on with us. And I just want to reach out to him and give him opportunity to talk about some of the services that he offers and give people a way to get in touch with him as well.
Awesome.
Yes.
So Chosen for Hope Counseling is here in San Antonio, and we are a team of culturally diverse clinicians, and we provide a range of outpatient psychiatric services. We can be contacted at 210-547-8000. or you can visit our website at www.chosen4hope.com.
Okay. And is it only in person, or do you do virtual services as well?
Thank you. So we do virtual within the state of Texas, and we also are seeing people in office as well.
Okay. And is there any particular thing you specialize in, or is it just in general?
So we have a team of different therapists, clinicians here, and so some of us we work with trauma, we work with grief. I am a registered play therapist, so I work from kids as young as 3, all the way up to, well, I see people all the way up to 90. But we do offer a variety of services as well. We have a psychologist, social worker, and master level clinicians, therapists. We help people with grief counseling, transition, military deployment, grief, bereavement. We are about to springboard into our groups. So we are going to have a men's group, a women's group, teen girls and teen boys group. We're so excited about that. And we're looking forward to the upcoming groups that we got planned.
That's awesome.
Okay, thank you. Anything you'd like to ask, Deandra?
No, I just want to thank you guys for lending your talents to doing this evening. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for trusting us here on this platform to just hear the inspiration behind it. And I could tell and as we could hear, it's a personal connection for you both. So just thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for allowing us to view it and be a part of this conversation with you.
Absolutely.
Sorry, with that, I just like to say, just wrap it up and say thank you to everyone who chose to join us for our awesome selection of films for Mental Health Awareness Month. And we hope that you will continue to join us. SABIFF will actually be having our film festival October 6th through the 9th of this year. And our focus this year is animation. So we have some awesome entries so far of Black animators in their films and some of the things they have submitted. And we want to thank everyone for just continuing to connect with films that bring stories to life that we can all identify with. And with that being said, have a good day, have a good week, have a good month, and God bless. See you later.